I'm a max guy, so I deserve the max. I mean, my time's coming. They know they got to bring the Brink Truck out. They know that.
Isaiah Thomas, born February 7th, 1989. In my last two features, I spoke about two of the biggest overachievers arguably in NBA history in Kawhi Leonard and Nikola Jokic. In speaking about players that overachieved, there can't be a conversation without Mr. Irrelevant himself. After all, that is what they call the 60th pick in the NBA draft, the last selection of the night. In the journey of basketball and having to make up ground to catch your peers, being 60th or being undrafted, you can't come from a further position. At 5'9", he was ranked outside the top 50 in high school, even though in his junior year he averaged over 30 points a game and was the Class 4A Player of the Year. Leaving high school, not much was expected of Thomas, and his 3 years at Washington didn't make things much different. He was still an underdog and still deemed a liability in multiple categories for an NBA team. But the Sacramento Kings, who held the final pick in 2011, took a chance on Thomas, and it became one of their more successful draft picks of the decade. Immediately, he became productive, starting 37 games, finishing averaging 11 points, 4 assists, and shooting 37% from 3, which ended up being the best on the 22-win 2011-2012 team. He was second team All-Rookie. He spent 3 years in Sacramento, and by the end of his stay, he had sorely outperformed his contract, becoming one of the only players in NBA history under 6 foot to average 20 points and at least 6 assists. Sacramento allowed him to walk in a sign and trade with Phoenix, where he spent just 46 games before being on the move again, this time to the Boston Celtics, which turned out to be the brightest parts of Thomas's career. In just 2 full seasons as a Celtic, he instantly became a fan favorite and shockingly one of the best players in the NBA. He was an all-star for the first time in 2016, then again in 2017, where he had one of the best seasons in Celtic history. Not only that, by then, Thomas was also top 5 in MVP voting, averaging 29 points, 6 assists, and shooting 39% from 3, taking over 8 a game. His 2016-17 season will go down in history as one of the best for a player under 6 feet. And then things took a downhill turn. In summer 2016, Thomas made a remark about teams having to bring the Brink Truck out to sign him, only to have that MVP season, then an injury in the playoffs that forced him to miss the rest of the 2017 postseason. His career was on the rise, or so he and most thought. He was expecting a $200 million contract until things happened and he became remembered for blowing the biggest bag in NBA history. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Isaiah Thomas is a 5'9" point guard from Tacoma, Washington that dreamed of playing in the NBA since he could remember, but often told because of his height, his chances were slim. He became one of the best players in Washington State history through his junior year at Curtis, averaging 31 points a game and becoming the Player of the Year in Class 4A. Bad grades derailed him remaining at Curtis, transferring to South Kent, Connecticut to finish his high school career before opting to return home and sign with the Washington Huskies. He was the Freshman of the Year in year 1, All Pac-10 as a sophomore, and a finalist for the Bob Cousy Award for Best Point Guard in the NCAA before he opted to forego his senior year and enter the NBA draft. Many didn't expect it, but the decision was made and the NBA journey began. Spurt number 1, overcoming being the last pick. The great thing about being last selected in anything is not much is expected of you, so whatever you produce seems like icing on the cake. That's basically what Isaiah Thomas's NBA beginnings and for the most part his career has been. Sure, in hindsight, he could find 200 million things that could have went better, but seeing where he came from, and the odds he had to beat being a player his size that didn't exactly wow you in college, I'm sure he's thankful for the career he's had. After all, he's 34 now and at least is still on an NBA roster. Being a second-round selection is already difficult in itself because your future isn't at all set, as unlike first-round selections, your contract isn't guaranteed and you can be moved or even let go and no one would even bat an eye. For a last pick, many wouldn't even have known you existed. But Isaiah became a star in the making immediately. I loved him in Sacramento and thought with he and a more mature DeMarcus Cousins could have been great building blocks and pillars for the team for at least 10 years. He was eventually traded from the Kings after 3 seasons, but by the end he was a borderline all-star averaging 20 points a game. He had a short 46-game stay in Phoenix, who were hoarding point guards at the time, so I never liked the fit there and excited to see him move on to a better situation in Boston, who desperately needed some scoring punch to replace the non-scoring Rajon Rondo, who had been traded December 2014. In Thomas's first 21 games as a Celtic, he played just 26 minutes a game and averaged 19 points and 5 assists, good enough for the Celtics to make him their featured piece in what they thought would be a rebuilding period until Thomas showed them otherwise, leading them to the conference finals by 2017. Being the last pick in the draft, we all rooted for Thomas to get paid, as it would have been the greatest sports story of all time. Stunt number 1, injured at the wrong time. That all-time great story was famously interrupted for Isaiah. At his peak, Thomas was the perfect star in sports. Underdog and undersized in a league of giants, picked last and traded multiple times only to stand at the top of the mountain with the rest of the superstars just as you're entering your prime. Cherry on top, you've earned the right to say things like these teams better back up the Brink Truck for your services and expect them all to bow and gracefully hand over the cash. In a contract year, Thomas couldn't have expected things to go better. Top 5 in MVP voting, 3rd in scoring average, and you put your team in championship contention when no one thought that would be the case. But maybe going so far that year was a bad deal in hindsight. Thomas injured his hip in a March 2017 game against the Timberwolves, but remained in the game and scored 27 points. Staying in the game became the biggest mistake of Thomas's journey looking back. Not just that game, but Thomas stayed in all the games he could for the team, even after losing his sister during the 2017 playoffs. He played in the very next game against the Bulls in the first round. Heart was never an issue. He led them to the conference finals on an injured hip, and after 2 games and a bad screen by Kevin Love, he was shut down for the rest of the playoffs. The injury came at a horrible time for Thomas, as it gave the Celtics and Danny Ainge the reason they needed not to offer the max to a 5'9" shoot-first point guard, making him their building block for the future. The Celtics traded him to the Cavaliers for Kyrie Irving after he requested a trade, and Thomas never fit in with LeBron and company. He also was never given a max, seeing as his production never got back to MVP status, not even close. It became one of the biggest missed contracts in NBA history, all because of an injury. Stunt number 2, maybe Danny was right. Danny Ainge came under a lot of fire in fans' eyes for not signing Thomas, even though he was now an injured product. He had done so much for that team and Ainge in bringing them from possible rebuilding stage to best in the conference and a healthy Thomas away from the NBA Finals. Not to mention, it was because of his great play he was even seen as equal trade value to land Kyrie Irving. Kyrie turned out to be a negative in Celtic history, but no one knew that at the time. He played well enough just to be a valuable trading piece for Ainge. But maybe Ainge made a great business decision not to max Thomas. In doing so would mean they would have to run Thomas's ball-dominant style of play for the foreseeable future and be tied to a guy that was a liability on defense even before being injured. For the contract he was on while with the team, he was a great investment. To give him $200 million while having a significant injury would have been a mistake. Only Ainge saw that at the time, while everyone, including Thomas, piled on Ainge for his decision. Isaiah declined greatly ever since leaving Boston and hasn't played more than 40 games a season since. He played for 6 teams since then and is currently a shell of what he once was. All in all, not a bad career for Thomas. He's likely to retire within a year or two, playing much longer than expected as the 60th overall pick. He's had some great highs and some unfortunate lows, but an overachiever nonetheless, who stamped his name as one of the best to do it under 6 feet. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was spurted and stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.